Okay, Alhamdulillah, all praise be to God. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. I bear witness there is no other God but God, and He has no partners. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Kaaba in the Quran, and God calls this a focal point for all the people. So we all know it's located in Saudi Arabia in the city of Mecca, and so God tells us in the Quran, Surah 2, verse 125, we have rendered the shrine, the Kaaba, a focal point for the people and a safe sanctuary. You may use Abraham's shrine as a prayer house. We commissioned Abraham and Ishmael, you shall purify my house for those who visit, those who live there, and those who bow and prostrate. So this is God's commandment, and Abraham and Ishmael were the ones who laid the foundations of Kaaba, and God commanded them to purify this place for those who visit, those who live there, those who bow and prostrate. And there are conditions for observing Hajj, as we see in 397. It says, in it there are clear signs, the station of Abraham, anyone who enters it shall be granted safe passage. The people owe it to God that they shall observe Hajj to this shrine when they can afford it. As for those who disbelieve, God does not need anyone. Okay, so clearly, the conditions for observing Hajj is that, for those of us who can afford it, we must observe Hajj. It's an obligation. It's one of the religious practices of Islam, that submission that we must observe when we can afford it. And and one other condition for observing Hajj is that we must have, when we prepare for the journey, the best provision is righteousness. And this is mentioned in 2 verse 197. It says, Hajj shall be observed in the specified months. Whoever sets out to observe Hajj shall refrain from sexual intercourse, misconduct, and arguments throughout Hajj. Whatever good you do, God is fully aware thereof. As you prepare your provisions for the journey, the best provision is righteousness. You shall observe me, O you who possess intelligence. And then the footnote says the Hajj can be observed any time during the sacred months, and we know from the Quran and from the mathematical evidence provided by God's Messenger of the Covenant that the 4 sacred months are in fact Zul Hajjah, Muharram, Safar, and Rabiul Awwal. However, we see that the local governments have restricted the Hajj, which leads to a whole lot of problems. But this is the second condition, is to have the provision of righteousness. And why that is important is because it is a once in a lifetime experience that as submitters we're going to have. And if we're not ready, as submitters, like our souls are not grown to the degree that we're righteous enough, that could end up backfiring on us. You could get into arguments, for example, and misconduct and things like that, and that could break away the sanctity of your ihram, and of course that would be problematic. You set out for the journey and you want it to be accepted. So the message of the covenant, that's why when he talks about Hajj, he said it's good to wait at least 10 years or so after you become a submitter, to grow your soul enough. Of course, that 10 years is not an absolute, it could be less, it could be more, but, he said at least 10 years because that's how long it takes for us to grow our soul to some degree that, we can, be, righteous enough that, we can take the benefit from this experience to grow our souls. So let's talk a little bit about the Kaaba itself. So we know it's like this cube-like structure, and it's a symbolic center for all the people. I mean, we see that as a sign, as a logos, and everywhere. People who identify themselves as followers of Abraham, show the Kaaba. So there are some mathematical signs that I wanted to bring up. So in 41:53, God says, a great prophecy. We will show them our proofs in the horizons and within themselves until they realize that this is the truth. Is your Lord not sufficient as a witness of all things? And the footnote says the words that compose this verse are 19, and their geometrical value adds up to be 1387, or 19 times 73. And so basically, God obviously has, told us in the Quran that God will continue to increase His proofs and show us the proofs in the horizons and amongst within ourselves. And we see that here in the Kaaba too. For example, if you look at the verses in the Quran where it refers to the Kaaba as a sacred masjid, or Masjid al-Haram in Arabic, it's actually mentioned 16 times. And if you actually add the sum of the surah numbers and the verse numbers where this word has been mentioned, it's actually 1504. And 1504 plus 16 gives us a multiple of 19. Exactly 19 times 80. Also, another thing to note is that God swears in the Quran by Mecca in 95:3, but He does not mention it by name. And this is 95:3, and it says, and this honored town. And then we know clearly from the footnote it's referring to Mecca, but Mecca has not been specifically mentioned in the Arabic. That's why we see it in the parentheses here. And so this is an interesting occurrence. And so there's a lot of confusion amongst people, and there's some self-proclaimed scholars that have come up with interpretations other than what God tells us in the Quran, claiming that Mecca is not the same as Becca or some other stuff. But we know clearly from the Quran the reason why it's mentioned as Mecca and Becca. One of the reasons is that the verse where it is referred to as Becca is actually an M initial surah. So if Mecca was referred to as Mecca in that verse, there would be one extra M added into the surah, and that would disrupt the number of letters, the frequency of the number of letters, occurrences of the letters M, and that's why. But we also see that there's also some more mathematical significance to it as well. For example, so we know there's only one Mecca in the Quran where it's mentioned Mecca. So if you add the sum of the digits for the surah number and the verse number plus 1, because it's mentioned only once, it adds up to be 19. Also, now if you look at Becca, it says the most important shrine established for the people is the one in Becca. And as we can see clearly from the footnote, it tells us why, as I mentioned earlier about the M's in the Quran. It says also that adding the digits 3 plus 9 plus 6 plus 1 equals 19 because it's mentioned once. Now let's repent. Tubu ilallah. Alhamdulillah, praise be to God. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. I bear witness there is no other God but God, and He has no partners. MashaAllah. So then in the next verse it says, in it are clear signs, the station of Abraham. Anyone who enters it shall be granted safe passage. The people owe it to God that they shall observe Hajj to the shrine when they can afford it. As for those who disbelieve, God does not need anyone. And so clearly one of the signs here is also that if you, it's pointing to the 19-based miracle as well, that in the Kaaba there are clear signs. You can see that sign is, one of the sign is 19. And we see that 3 plus 9 plus 7 equals 19. Allahu Akbar. Okay, so also if you look at the geographic coordinates of Kaaba in decimal degrees, so you put the latitude and the longitude, so these are the digits from the latitude and longitude that I found on Google. So, subhanAllah, if you put them side by side, you get a number that is a multiple of 19. And if you look at Kaaba, where it's located, in reference to the North Pole, it's actually 19 degrees, just about 19 degrees exactly from the North Pole. And we know we use the North Pole as a reference point, right? When we use a compass. If you look at the area of square footage of the Kaaba itself, it's actually 627 square feet, which is actually 19 times 33. If you look at the height of Kaaba, it's actually 39 feet and 6 inches. And, ironically, that's the same number if you see Surah 3, verse 96, so it's the same number. Okay, and the next thing I wanted to talk about could be somewhat complicated, but hopefully not. This talks about the golden ratio, and its reference to Kaaba. Now, basically, if you look at the design in God's creation, there is a pattern of proportionality that God has put in place to design God's creation. Like if you look at the design of a flower or a design of a leaf or anything that you find in creation, you see the Fibonacci pattern that shows almost as God's signature. And if you actually look at the Fibonacci, which is probably a sermon in itself, if you look at the Fibonacci sequence, it's also has the mathematical code of number 19 embedded into it. That shows that it's part of God's signature in the universe. And so we see that inside the Kaaba. Without further ado, let me just quickly play the video.
Mecca has been ordered as Qibla direction, convention place for billions of Muslims, and as the holy center of Islam. Soon, you will witness the scientific proof of unbelievable mysteries that have remained hidden in the holy city, Mecca, for thousands of years. The constant, superior design number of mathematics, 1.618. The Creator has always used the very same number in numerous events in the universe. In our heart pulses, the aspect ratio of DNA spiral, and the special design of the universe, which is named as dodecahedron, and the leaf array rules of plants, which is named as phyllotaxy, in the snowflakes, crystals, in the spiral structure of numerous galaxies. The Creator has used the same number, the number of golden mean, 1.618. It is observed that this ratio is applied to the pyramids of Egypt, like it was applied to various famous architectural works. Famous astronomer Kepler defines this number as a precious treasury. As the vision expert Dr. Stephen Markout was proved as a result of his 25-year-long study that human faces and bodies designed pursuant to this ratio are accepted as beautiful by every single person in the world. If the aspect ratio of any form is 1.618, then this form is convenient to golden mean. Perfect design. So, where is the golden mean point of the Earth? The proportion of distance between Mecca and the North Pole to the distance between Mecca and the South Pole is exactly 1.618, the golden mean. Moreover, the proportion of the distance between the South Pole and the city of Mecca to the distance between both poles is again 1.618. The miracle is not over yet. The golden mean point of the Earth, according to common location language of mankind, graticule map, is in the city of Mecca. The proportion of eastern elongation to the western elongation, which are determined as solstice line from Mecca, is again 1.618. Moreover, as shown in the figure, the proportion of western elongation of Mecca to the solstice line to the perimeter of the Earth on this very latitude is surprisingly the golden mean, 1.618. The golden mean point of the Earth, for all mapping systems, even though they vary by a few kilometers, is always within the city borders of Mecca, within the holy region that includes Kaaba. You can measure very sensitively the distance between any 2 points with the help of Google Earth's ruler feature. If you wish, you can verify the correctness of the given ratios by calculating latitude and longitude with a simple calculator. The Thematrix program is an American program that is used to show golden mean of pictures and paintings. If we accept the graticule map of the Earth as an alive painting whose depth never ends and open it in this program, we will find out that the golden mean point of the Earth is the city of Mecca. With respect to positive longitude and latitude values and being on the lands, not the sea, the only golden mean point of the Earth is Mecca. Miracles continue. The golden mean miracle in the Mecca verse of the Quran. There is one unique verse in the Quran that includes Mecca word and an expression that tells there are clear evidences within the city which will give belief to humanity. The relation between the city of Mecca and the golden mean is clearly engraved in the Ali Imran Surah, 96th verse. The total number of all letters of this verse is 47. Calculating the golden mean of letter total, we find out that the word of Mecca is expressed by 47 divided by 1.618 equals 29. There are 29 letters from the beginning of the verse till the word Mecca. just like it isn't a world map. If only one single word or letter was missing, this ratio could never be constituted. Without any impediment, we have conducted the very same process that we conducted on the Earth map and witnessed the glorious coherence of letter numbers that reveals the relation of Mecca and the Golden Mean. All this shows that the creator of the earth and mathematics is the same one God. Beg description that created Kaaba, Holy Region, and the Quran. He reminds whole humanity that knowing the future and common languages of humanity, he gave clues for them. A newer invention on the relation between the Golden Mean, Mecca, Kaaba, and the Quran becomes revealed in each single day. In the figure, it is shown that the measurements with Golden Mean compass, also known as the North.
So if you can see in this section also, if you just look at the distance here itself within the city of Mecca to the rest of the region, also it shows that the ruler that's also the golden ratio. It's in accordance with that. Another thing I wanted to mention, though, it's very important for us to remember that this is, mashallah, these are all signs for us to strengthen our faith and belief, but also, a reminder for us that, this is an obligation for all of us that, we must take seriously as something that we need to do once in a lifetime. And, there is some, obviously, some controversy around it, but, it needs to be clarified is that, Satan's been trying to discourage submitters from actually performing this important rite of our religion, as he has confused, people with other rites of religion by telling people that they should not be observing Hajj because the Arabs are controlling the land, for example. But we know from the Quran that even when we see that God said to Muhammad, actually I should have probably shared that verse, but the verse in the Quran that says, when they were at war, that these people, the idol worshippers, prevented their offerings, Muhammad's offerings, and the believers with them from reaching Kaaba, right? And so that shows us that while they were performing Hajj and they were sending their offerings to Kaaba, even though at that time it was not purified, right? Because these idol worshippers had strong hold of it, so they were preventing their offerings from reaching the Kaaba. Nevertheless, these people were performing Hajj. So there is no place in the Quran where we justify that, as long as the Saudis are in control of it, that we should not be performing Hajj. There's actually a video from the Messenger of the Covenant that was actually, unfortunately, taken way out of context, and now it's kind of being promoted openly, where he was just telling people at his time, while he was talking to them, that we're not going to go for Hajj now, we're going to go for Hajj later, because right now the land is not purified, and obviously, we'll charter a plane and we'll go together. Now that being, a messenger of God, not knowing the future of things, he didn't know when his life was going to end or when the land was going to be purified. So he was, and him being a messenger of God, he was receiving threats on a daily basis, literally on a daily basis, he was receiving threats. So imagine if he went for Hajj at that time with all the submitters, what would happen? They wouldn't come back. So he was telling them we should wait. And of course there's wisdom behind it from God as well. But for us, praise be to God, we don't have any such restrictions now. I mean, the land is fairly, open, and we also have people who are observing Hajj outside of the 10-day period, whatever, after the 8th. So people are going before, and I think in the future people might also be able to go after. It's a lot cheaper too that way. But nevertheless, the idea here is to dispel the myth that it's like this prohibition that we shouldn't be performing Hajj. We should be performing Hajj. The only requirements is as long as we can afford it, And as long as we have the spiritual growth that we need as a minimum criteria to go there and take benefit from it, God willing, we should all pray to God that inshallah we are able to observe that in our lifetime. Let's pray.